I think in this film, they tried to make a mix, and rather, if you want a 3.5 hour film, you could probably put them both in there, but they chose to make a manageable length film. And, I think that's what, as somebody said,
Don't talk
that's what
like that. Put your
they
hand
achieved
right
what they
up.
tried to
Right.
achieve.
No
So,
one sees your hand.
Jerry, please mute yourself. Joel,
yeah.
you have anything more to add?
No, I was going to say that they tried to mix the musical accomplishments with the
Don't
personal.
take your hand down.
I think they achieved that.
Okay, thank you. Roz and Jerry? No, go ahead.
Well, from what I read, Bradley Cooper worked closely with the family on this movie, and they approved it and they liked it.
Yep.
So I'm sure that he went over everything before he did the screenplay. And so they wanted it more about the family and the mother and less about him. He went to Thanksgiving at their house.
Yeah, I mean, he missed the Thanksgiving.
No, he went.
Oh, so that contradicted the movie.
No. In real life, the family invited Bradley Cooper to Thanksgiving.
But there was a scene where he's talking to Jamie, his daughter, and she says, where were you on Thanksgiving? He said, well, things happen.
Oh, because I read that he went.
Well, maybe he did, and maybe that's an invention. I doubt it. It may have been, I don't know. I can't defend that because I didn't read what you read.
Okay.
But let me say, Betty, last one. Lower left corner, you're muted. Lower left, we can't hear you, Betty. Lower left corner, unmute. There you go.
Sorry, I don't know how I got muted. Anyway, we've all heard about Bernstein, but I had not realized how established and well known and famous his wife was. That I read a little bit about her afterwards, that her accomplishments. So I can certainly appreciate that the family, wanted more about her to be in there also, because she gave up a great deal to be with him.
And that's a very strong theme in the film from her point of view, is the cost of that relationship. All right, these are all really good comments, and you've almost taken away all my thunder, but let's talk about the intention of the filmmaker versus the real Lenny Bernstein that we knew. How many people here saw a young person's concert on television? I bet a lot of us grew up with him, right? No? Okay, a few. And he was more subdued there than he was in the film and in his other concerts. There was much else that the film did not cover, and it's clearly intentional. And I want to run down the list of omissions that, as I think Joel said, it would have been 3.5 hours if you included them all. Radical Chic, when they had representatives of the Black Panthers come and speak at their apartment on the Upper West Side to educate the wealthy elite about what the Panthers were trying to do. And Tom Wolfe wrote an essay, the guy who wrote Bonfire of the Vanities, wrote an essay for New York Magazine called Radical Chic. And he described the event as rich white elites having a pity party for poor Blacks who were trying to get credence in the cultural landscape. And it was more critique of wealthy, educated people, liberals, or as they were called then. This happened in 1970, and it really caused a big stir in the media. Now, his wife is the one who instigated that soiree in their apartment. And Barbara Walters was there, and lots of celebrities, as probably a lot of wealthy doctors and lawyers from the West Side, and many of them Jewish, many not. This it became a book, that and another essay he wrote called Mau Mauing the Flatcatchers, about indigenous people, and they were published together as a book. So that aspect of his life, other being a social gadfly because he was so well known, is omitted. His politics are omitted. He was virulently against the Vietnam War. Virulently. And that was omitted. The young people's concerts also omitted. I don't know if that was because they couldn't get the rights to the public television material, or I think it just was too much. But certainly that was a different part of his personality, certainly his warmth and his outreach. He loves people, even children. And I'm sure he was as passionate, I don't remember exactly, but I'm sure he was as passionate explaining the music he conducted for them as he was, instructing the conductor at the very end of the piece, or conducting the choir in rehearsal, the chorus. So that's another thing that was omitted. He was an ardent supporter of Israel. In 1947, he went there and performed a concert with what was then called the Palestinian Symphony. And he went back several times. He had a concert in the Negev. And he went back again after the 1967 war and said, gee, I have to come here as often as possible. And at that time, on that trip, I believe, he performed 40 concerts in 60 days in Israel. So I think that's pretty good Israeli credentials. Steve, can I finish the list and then you can chime in? Okay. I mean, it's amazing the kind of life he had. And it's not just how do you cram that into the movie, covering the broad strokes. It's not a documentary, and how do you get under his skin? What were the real issues in his life? And I believe this film tackles the difficulties of being a true artist, genius, savant type person. Savant doesn't do him credit because he was a polymath and so knowledgeable. Great credentials at being a Zionist. No mention except for one mention of Stephen Sondheim, that brilliant lyricist, with whom he had a relationship and a very productive collaboration, wrote the lyrics for West Side Story. Jerome Robbins, of course, is seen in the movie once or twice in the Sailors Ballet on the town. And we'll talk about that scene. It's very important. He was very engaged in the civil rights movement as well. So that's why, Tom Wolfe could say radical chic, but clearly the guy demonstrates his progressive bona fides. He put his money where his mouth was, and he used his celebrityhood, to get important ideas out to the population at large. What else? Oh, his comment about Israel after the concert was, I am needed here. Music was needed there. And he said, these people are so committed, they'll die here rather than leave. That was his first impression in 1947. It took 15 years to get this film made, despite the support of Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese. And I don't know how they got the money up for it. Maybe just it took streaming video to fund it. It was not a cheap movie to make. If you want to learn more about the facts of his life, in the American Maestro series on PBS, Susan Lacey actually did a program herself. She was the producer of the series, called Leonard Bernstein, Reaching for the Notes. So that's the documentary side of it that we don't see. Vern, let's let Steve go first.
I was just going to say, you call these omissions, and it does relate to Fern's initial comment, with which I agree. That wasn't what this is. I don't know if you can say they're omissions.
I'm just reporting on how the press reported on the movie. That's what people are claiming.
It's not.
So I totally think they're not omissions and agree with Fern.
Okay, what movie to make, and this is what he did, and it wasn't in no way did I watch this thinking this was an effort to be a comprehensive biography of his life. I don't think they intended that, nor is that what I saw or expected.
Okay, but given that massive body of biographical information and activism, you can see why some people here said, I missed that. That's not the Lenny I thought I knew. Yes, there's somebody who's not here tonight who hasn't been with us for a while, who shall not be named, and it's not the great orange one. It's somebody else. And oh, I gave it away. He always said, as an example, when we saw the Lucy and Desi movie, and they invented the Edgar Hoover phone call, several people on that Zoom said, well, I can't stand this movie because they just invented that and it's not factual. Well, you know, I could see that fabrication was pretty overt. But in here, these are all acts of omission. And I think they reflect the filmmaker's clear intention that the real story was between him and Felicia and the stresses it brought to their family. And it's like, how do you contain two opposing ideas in your head at the same time? It creates tension, as it was between them. And tension between male and female is a big part of this film, and there's even a line about it. Jeff?
Yeah, I'm gonna go off of a couple of things you said. First of all, one of the things that's really interesting that most people do not know is that when the state of Israel was declared May 14th, 1948, Leonard Bernstein conducted the symphony when Ben-Gurion was speaking and played Hatikva. So he was there on the day that the state of Israel was created. The other thing I want to point out is that quote that's at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
And it goes to what you're saying, which is, I can't remember the quote exactly, but it says something about the fact that contradictions, his life was about contradictions, but they were never resolved or something like to that.
Let me help you with a quote. He said, the purpose of art is not to answer the question, but to provide points of view, contradicting points of view for which there is no answer. And the value is in the tension created between the new vision it evokes in the consumer.
And exactly. And I think that the film is structured around the contradictory nature of his life. The fact that he wanted to do like Broadway shows, but there was the academic community that was kind of opposed to that. They wanted him to do more classical kinds of composition. His tension between being gay and having a wife who he dearly loved. So his life, but it's like never resolved. It just raises more questions. And I'll stop there.
Okay, well, that tension is exactly what the whole film is about. How could they stay together? What did they see in each other? Why did he need her? Why did she tolerate his needs? The elephant in the room is that he was bisexual, and avidly so. It's never mentioned that way. It never comes out. They never say it, but we know it. And it's all over the film. And if you, I loved it the first time I saw it, and I saw it again this afternoon, and I made notes. The affairs with men that he had are all over almost every scene. It's a subtext. Now, I've talked about understatement before, as in Asian films that sort of don't really talk about things directly. Well, this is like a brilliant example of smart people talking about something indirectly all the time. They knew what they were talking about, but they could never refer to his infidelity. You know, when we go through the film, I'll point out these moments, but she said to him, I know who you are. You know, and she means, I know that you have affairs with men. You don't have to explain to me. It's okay. You know, and that kind of, I know when I married him, you know, and there's a great scene when she's lying down on the grass with his sister, talking about the costs of the relationship to her. And, you know, she does it because she loves it. And she said, if it ever feels like a sacrifice, I'm compromising myself, I'll have to leave. And eventually we hit that point. So the reason why the film may have seemed slow to some people is because it's like a spiral. We keep talking about this issue between them, his infidelity, and it gets more and more tense and involved as we go through the film. And I found this, I didn't really see it in all the scenes before. But it's there in so many of them. It's like they're talking about the same thing every scene, but it's in a different way until it explodes in that big argument from their hotel room with the Snoopy float going by on the outside, which is set up because there's a Snoopy stuffed doll in a preceding scene, which says, "Who left the Snoopy on the floor?" That's a playful note. But this is what we're watching, and it's an example of filmmaking that takes us through our paces, through a relationship without telling us it's doing that. We're witnessing it. And I clocked it in the first 10 minutes. We go through so many scenes. And, you know, it's not a montage, but they're these entirely encapsulated scenes that are very short. And yet there's a leap between them that advances the story, and we get it. You know, that phone call to he gets in the morning, you know, it's just great, the reveal when he throws open the blinds and the light comes in on him and we realize he's going to conduct. And then it turns out he's in bed with a guy and he spanks him on the tush and runs off, you know, gleefully to get ready to conduct at the Carnegie Hall. It's hilarious, it's funny, it's also telling, you know, that this guy is, as I said in my description of the film, he's always in motion. And that didn't have to be any more than it was. And then we're in the we go to Carnegie Hall and he does his concert, and there's just a little bit of it from the beginning, and then there's a congratulations scene at the end. And there are quite a few transitions in the film, visual transitions, filmmakery things, like when he meets her and she takes him to the theater where she's rehearsing, and she walks past him after they do their reading, and then she walks onto the real stage. It looks like a continuous shot. There's a shot where she lifts her head up and then he lifts his head up in a different moment. There are all these connections that are being made and transitions that help us slide through the storytelling very delightfully. They're seamless. They're so well done. And again, I'm so impressed with Bradley Cooper. You know, who knew he could direct a film as well? I'm talking about as a filmmaker, as an image maker, as a creator of kinetic visuals that relate and move us along. Fern, did you wave your hand? Yeah. Unmute.
I just, in terms of what he does well, I just wanted earlier to add that I just read today that he spent 6 years studying conducting. 6 years in order to do the final scene, which took 6 minutes.
Yeah.
And he said without the 6 years, he couldn't have done it. So it, you know, it's a lot of perspiration as well as inspiration.
Yes. But you know, it's not just for that one scene. What happens to an actor when they're studying the subject they're portraying, he's picking up not just mannerisms, but the reason behind the passion. How does the passion express itself? And that's an amazing scene. It's in a cathedral in England. And I don't know what the piece is, if it came from Mass. Oh, that's something.
Oh, Kaddish.
It was from Kaddish. Okay. That's another thing I should have said. The film does not mention Kaddish. It does mention resurrection. So the guy, you know, it's not like he was against religion. He embraced the emotionality of it, the how deep it can go into somebody's being. So I found that very interesting. But the filmmaking in the first 10 minutes to accomplish so much. Oh yeah, and then we see him on the toilet giving notes to his entourage. Very funny. Again, you know, yes, he's kind of obsessive compulsive or manic, totally comfortable with himself. And then he's composing with Copeland on the piano something for Fancy Free, which is a ballet. It's a number out of On the Town. 3 soldiers go into we hear it later when we see that scene. Let's move on and parse through the movie, because stuff will come up, I think, that will help reinforce this theme of tension between him and her, in his sexuality, between the creative. He makes a point of being, in the Edward R. Murrow interview, Merle says, well, are you a composer or conductor? And he said, well, creators are kind of introverted and performers are extroverted. And of course, the answer to Lenny is he's both. And that is what really resonates in that final scene in the cathedral. But let's move on. So we go, she arrives at like 10 minutes. She takes a bus to the party. I thought that was interesting. Didn't pay for a taxi. And Comden and Green are singing. I mean, they were friends in the apartment. I forget their first names, but they were a great composing couple. And then it looks like they're in the phone booth together. And
Adolph and Betty.
Yeah, thank you. And then when all that ends, they're in the phone booth together and they're recapping what they know about each other. And she talks about him being the son of an Orthodox Jew, and he talks about her having a Chilean Jewish father named Cohn, which not a lot of the reviewers or critics mentioned. They mention the omissions, of all of other things, but they won't accuse themselves of the importance of that omission in the criticism of the movie. They'll criticize the nose all they want, and there was such a brouhaha over that. In Tablet magazine, which is, excuse me for those of you who may like it, it's very unreliable because it's quite biased towards, they're not even moderate. They're to the right of moderate. And despite the number of thoughtful writers they have on it, this article appeared. It's where I picked up all the omissions that, it was a report on all the omissions of the movie. But what was the headline of the article? The schnoz. And of course, they dragged into, not just was the nose artificial, Bradley Cooper, again, they weren't endorsing the criticism, but they were reciting a lie, an aesthetic lie, which is he's not Jewish, therefore he should not have played the role. And those of us, we see this all day long in overly woke school systems and in politics, but it goes way back to a Broadway show called Miss Saigon, where, the big moment is the helicopter descends, on stage. Everybody waits for that. Well, the Vietnamese woman was not played by a Vietnamese person. And this was in the 70s, I believe, late 70s. And the point is, no, Steve, it wasn't late 70s, 80s.
Actually, I don't know if it was very late 80s. It was certainly early 90s.
How was it?
And interestingly, the helicopter scene in New York was at a very different point in the play. They changed it when it came to LA.
I see. Well, the producer, Colm, somebody or other, a Brit, said, what are you saying they have to be Vietnamese? Actors act. That's what they do. They transform themselves. And let me take it a step further. We want diversity in actors because every actor, regardless of their background, brings something different to the script and to the character. So it informs us more deeply, perhaps. Now, do you want to see every film made about Lenny Bernstein and say, oh, that was the truest Lenny, or that made me understand him the most? It's not how art works, and we talk about this all the time, the difference between the intention and the perception. And we've had a good display of them, and all of them are legitimate. Your perceptions are absolutely legitimate, but we have to examine them to find their sources. I think we saw The Lemon Tree once, years ago at University Synagogue, about the Palestinian woman who has her family's lemon grove, and it just happens to be across from the house of the new defense minister, and they deem her lemon grove unsafe because terrorists could hide behind the trees, so they cut them all down. And I was on a panel at a discussion, and some man complained, well, the film said nothing about the Palestinians launching rockets from Gaza. And I said, well, films have to have a point of view. If they didn't, they'd be boring if you tried to please everybody. The point is, the point of view makes them unique and makes them singular. It's like we couldn't have thought of the film in this way because only Bradley Cooper could, and his colleagues. It's bringing something new to us. outside of our normal universe, our thoughts, our feelings, and it makes us feel things we never felt before and imagine things we never did. So that's the function of art. And in a way, that's the opening quotation. The contradictory answers of art lead us to attention that is actually healthy. All right, let's keep going through the movie. That phone booth is very interesting. And it did stress his Jewishness, and hers too. Her Jewishness is not really referred to much. I think his is only once more talking about how his father was cruel to him. But after the party, right, it's a meet cute, and they go to her rehearsal space, and Joseph, the janitor, says, lock the door behind you. And then they're in bed the next morning, or they're on the floor because his back hurts. And that may be 18 minutes into the movie, out of 135, 38. And then that scene also has the transition where she walks past him in the nighttime scene in the rehearsal space to her appearing on stage to applause, to establish her credibility as a theatrical performer. And she asks him at one point, what do you want? And he says, I want a lot of things. And again, this is the tension. He wants to be with men. He wants to be with her. He wants to have a family. He wants to be on the town. He wants to compose for Broadway and write musicals as well as do serious compositions, despite what, and he wants his own name. They agree on that. So again, that's another tension in him that is referred to. And then they say in after that morning scene when they're on the floor, okay, you tell me a secret and then I'll tell you a secret. He dreams of killing his father because he was so cruel. And then he says, I can't find myself. Because of this tension within him. He just doesn't have a sense of his identity, but he's so exuberant. He has so much talent and so much skill that's exciting to him. And he chases that rather than self-knowledge. And then she says to him, you don't know how much you need me. And, in 20 minutes, you've got two characters who are deeply entrenched in each other's lives and psyches. For her to say that's a very powerful line. I know more about you than you know about yourself because I know you need me, and you can't acknowledge that yet. So that's a very powerful line. And then accidentally, he introduces David to Felicia. And he says, that was unkind. I shouldn't have done it. David is his lover, the clarinetist. And she said, no, it's okay. And it's like, we don't quite get it then, but that's the subtext. She knows it somehow. I mean, maybe she's, heard rumors or whatever. She knows it. And then we come upon a lovely musical piece called For Felicia. And they're walking, it's on the estate in Connecticut, and they're walking through a row of trees. And she says, I know who you are. Shall we give it a whirl? Marriage is not mentioned. They've already talked about getting married. So the authors, the screenwriters and Cooper are jumping right into the action, the emotional action, without a development. They don't have to refer to the other discussions. It's, are we going to get married or not? And then they jump forward in time. They already have a family. We've seen jumps in time like that before. It's not exceptional filmmaking, but have we mentioned that it's all in black and white? Have we mentioned that it's in the old television format of 3x4, 3 times high and 4 times wide? That's what those black bars were on the side of the screen for 99% of the picture. And we're approaching when it goes to color. It happened at 48 minutes. We're coming up on that moment. But, I didn't even notice the shift because the black and white photography was just so stunning. The depth of detail in the shadows, the luminosity of the highlights, the whites, the glint off his wristwatch in the scene in Fairfield. This gorgeous, sumptuous black and white photography, wherever it was. And then so that's where, with Edward R. Murrow, they have the discussion of extroverts and introverts. And Lenny is both, right? And again, I'll get into that more deeply, but he knows himself. He knows the parts of himself. He just can't integrate them into a personality. And that's his tension that he can't resolve. And then there's the scene in the park where he meets David and David's wife and David's child. This is hilarious, I thought. And he bills and coos with the toddler baby, not even a toddler. And he says, I bet you don't know that I slept with both your parents. I mean, it's funny. And he tells it, it's a joke for the parents to share with him. It's not about the baby. And it's like, that's the kind of freedom of expression that he had. He had, I won't say no filter, but he knew how to play on the edge. And with them, it wasn't an edge. He was confident that he would not lose their friendship. And then she takes the baby somewhere and he and David walk. It's Central Park West, I believe. You can correct me if I'm not. And this sadness overcomes Lenny and he stops walking. And then David, a couple of paces ahead, stops and turns and they face each other. And you see Lenny weeping, not demonstrably, but weeping about this conflict, his love for David and his love for Felicia, and how their lives have moved to a point where they can't be together. And he still wants to be with them, but he wants to be with Felicia and have a family as well. And they kiss, and he says, you see, there's a couple across the street wondering if I'm that guy, do they notice my ears, how big my ears are? And it ends with a laugh. Can that be him? He suggests they're saying. And then we cut to the scene in Fairfield where Felicia's on the grass with his sister. And she talks about how there is a sacrifice to being with him. But I enjoy it. It's part of what keeps us together. But I don't call it a sacrifice. When it begins to be a sacrifice, when I feel like I'm losing something because I'm giving so much to him, then I have to leave. So she has a lot of awareness too. She knows exactly what she's doing, marrying and having children with this bisexual guy. But she knows he needs her to reach his potential. And it's not that he has a writer's block or anything. He needs somebody to help keep him together. And she can. There's a lovely adagietta where it's kind of, this is one of the murky transitions they had, where we're still in black and white and it dissolves to her in the background in white. And it's a musical moment. And it's, I question what it did, why it was there. It's like the one thing that felt a little out of place, but it was beautiful nonetheless. The adagietta was not his. It was some well-known composer. It was may have been Mahler. And then we go to the party scene. And guess what? It's in color. That's where that transition, 48 minutes in. Why in color? Well, this is an Upper West Side cocktail party, if there ever was one, for Tom Wolfe to ridicule, for MAGA Republicans to say those elites don't know anything, Remember during the George W. Bush years, the criticism was, oh, those elites, all they drink Chardonnay and eat brie. We're always looking for these easy handles to condemn someone. Lenny's on full display there, flirting with men. There's the tall guy, the first tall guy who he brushes off as exuberant praise for. He's introduced to a lot of people, pats the men on the chest. And then he meets Tommy at that party. And he says, I need to go outside for a smoke. Will you accompany me? And they wind up kissing in the hallway and she sees this. So if you don't know what the tension is about by this point, you're never going to get it. But, that's 45 minutes into It's 1/3 of the way into the movie. So it's not a bad, some people say films are 3-act structure. It's BS. But this is 1/3 of the way through it. And he apologizes right away. And then that scene's over. Again, there's a lot that was spoken of after that. We don't see it. What we do see is the guy we see later interviewing him for a book in the country house. It's like 15 years later than that party. He has gray hair. And he says, I feel like the world's on the edge of collapse. And it's not political collapse. It's about creative freedom and creative expression. And it makes him question the value, what lasting value he may have. So he's having this, not crisis of confidence. He thinks he can make music, but what's it all about and why am I doing it? And we then see her where in a scene, I forget where it is, she looks crushed. Again, it's unspoken performance. By the way, Carey Mulligan's role and performance was just outstanding. As good as his, as I think more effortless than his. Because she was not just, she wasn't there because she was a doormat. She was very active in his life and their life together, I should say. But we see the signs of her failing. I think the line is she wants to get off the bus. Right. And then there's the line that she says in Argentina. Later, she says, don't stand under a bird that's just eaten. And she says, well, I'm going to get out of the way of the shit that's going to fall. And that's in their apartment before Snoopy. But he then says earlier, I love people. It's hard to be alone. Composing is hard. Wait a second. That's the tension, right? When he's composing, he's alone with his thoughts, with the music, with his intensity. But when he's conducting, he's out in public, gesticulating and loving music. That's the extrovert. And he says, well, if I believe in a divine element, there is a way to merge the two. I think that's what he says. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't read my own writing here. And that's a spiritual or that's the extent of his religiosity. He was too busy to think about the notion of a deity. But he thought in terms of forces, and the forces in his life were alone, together, creating or performing with her or with David, or free to be whatever I want to be. And there's some wonderful scene coming up that I'll refer to that soon. When she watches him rehearse with the chorus, she's smiling and she's accepting, but she's also sad. Watching the chorus, I forget what they're singing. And then Tony appears. That's the boyfriend he met at the party. In other words, they're a fixture. So she's beginning to show signs of defeat. I don't have a number on how deep that happens. And then we're in the country, and he arrives with Tony. And there's a very interesting music cue. It's the only cue from West Side Story. It's the Jets cue. There's gonna be a rumble tonight. And it starts with a car arriving. And he's arriving with the guys. One of them is Tony. And the symbolism, I think the thinking there is, oh, this is conflict, just like the Sharks and the Jets in West Side Story. Trouble's going to happen. This is not a cool thing to do. This is a challenge to Felicia, this flamboyant gay thing he's doing, inviting his boyfriend and the boyfriend's other lover to the country house for the weekend when the family's going to be there. And that's when Felicia has a heart-to-heart talk with him. Jamie is here. She's home from school, and she's back from Tanglewood where she interned. She heard rumors about you. Felicia does not say what the rumors were, but she makes him promise that he won't tell Jamie that he's gay or bisexual because it would shatter her too much. But she says, please talk to her. She's very distressed about this, but don't you dare tell her the truth. Again, this is the tension, between the truth and the comfortable reality we like to paint, that we like to put up for people. And he goes to her directly, and you think he's going to tell her because he's just so impulsive. And he's wearing a sweatshirt. Can anybody tell me what the Hebrew was on his sweatshirt? Steve Miller, Yeshiva Bucher. Oh,
Harvard.
It says Harvard.
Oh, Harvard in Hebrew letters.
Yeah.
I almost shouted it out at the movie theater because I assumed nobody else would have figured it
I
out.
was staring at, but I needed longer to get it. That's hilarious because that's like Chardonnay and Brie, isn't it? Right? It's a walking target.
But it's also showing that he really wanted to be accepted by that academic,
Yes.
by, the academia for his music making, which
Yes.
which was another tension.
Right. He wanted everybody to love him. He says, I love people so much. I think in that saying, that sentiment is, I also need to be loved by so many people. I'm so insecure. I need the adulation. And I know I'm good. I've done some work that people like, but that's his weak spot. He can't resist seeking adulation from others. And this scene with Jamie, where he says, well, it's about jealousy. And he tells her all these stories about people who are jealous of him. And he basically says, don't listen to those rumors. They're just jealous of me. And she says, oh, Dad, thank you so much for sharing that with me. But they don't really confront what the issue is. He doesn't tell her. And in a way, that's the film's whole ethos. I don't know how many of you grew up in families that were loving but never talked to each other. I did. And I so got this. There's an elephant in the room and no one acknowledges it. Jamie didn't know, but she was bought off by the loving adoration of her father. So in thinking about this film and perhaps the slow points, those of you who felt it went a little too slow, it's in those moments of silence, you should watch it again and figure out, are people deceiving each other in those moments? That's very important, and he skates by omission, right? By avoiding the issue. Steve Miller, your hand is still raised?
That's Mona.
Mona.
I think one of my favorite moments in the movie was when he is at the party and he finds out that Felicia's very long Latin name ends with Cohen. And
Yeah.
There's a flash, and it's just a very quick gesture. He's quite happy. He thinks, oh, great.
Jewish.
This gorgeous girl is Jewish. And he's really, it's clear that he's attracted to her from the moment he sees her.
Yeah.
And I didn't interpret the Harvard sweatshirt in Hebrew letters as currying favor. I thought it was very consistent that he was announcing he was Jewish, and he was announcing, I'm proud of who I am.
Right.
And this is part of my identity. And it was that was actually one of my favorite moments in the whole movie, when he finds out her name, and it's a very quick smile.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I got that recognition too. It's like my son, who's 30 years old and single in San Francisco, great place to be a straight male. he told us that, oh yeah, I just, went out with a woman once. She's a redhead. She's a lawyer, and she's one of ours. He said, oh my God, where did that come from? I have never used that term. My father pulled it on me once. In his generation, pre-World War II, it was, oh, he or she is a triple O, one of ours. I had to ask him what it meant. And one of the few gems he shared with me from his youth. But it's like, I understand that flash of recognition. You know, I probably had it with my one and only wife, whom I'm still with, 35 years ago. I don't remember, but there's something there if you're inclined in that direction. A shock of recognition, maybe. But it's all about how we saw into each other. And that whole scene in what looks like a phone booth is, we're the same, don't you get it? And she's saying, well, what do you mean we're the same? And he talks about, basically, we want so much. We are so many different selves, and the world wants us to be only one. And that's a tension there that they share. And that's why she can say, I know who you are, because she has the same tension. She understands that tension in him. She's Jewish, yet she's, you know, has she doesn't go by Monte Allegra Cohn. Her stage name is just Felicia Monte Allegra, which is like gorgeous, you know, to Broadway's ears. You know, it sounds artistic and exotic. So she knows too. So, you know, this whole unspokenness, it becomes a beautiful part of the film if you look at all these scenes that may be slow to you. If you watch it a second time, and I encourage you to do so, it gets richer and richer, because you know, having seen the film once, you know what each scene is about. Now, maybe that's unfair from a filmmaker, you know, film criticism point of view, that a scene has to explain itself within the context of the whole film, maybe not when you first see it. But it's just an example of the richness of this film. Again, at the end, it kind of wears thin, but at this point, it's a beautiful thing to watch, because you see this elephant in the room in so many scenes. I want to go back to the scene on the town where the sailors are dancing. You know, and he's just having the best time seeing Robbins interpret his music in dance moves. And it is terrific. I've seen it on stage, and it's really good, but nothing as good as what we saw. Of course, it was abbreviated in this, because the camera's on the stage. You know, I'm not in the audience, removed. And you see the actors, and it's a low angle camera on the dancers as well as on the actors. And, you know, Lenny's having the best time. And then he's drawn into the dance, and he becomes one of the sailors, and he has to dance and jumps on a table or a chair and jumps off. And this is a great sequence, because then, you know, not only is that a sexual innuendo, but all of New York City's streets appear as dancers on the stage, and both he and she get drawn into the chaos of a Manhattan street. It's like Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. It's the chaos of the city. And all the dancers pull them away from each other, and they're trying to get back to each other. This is a gorgeous cinematic interpretation of context and subtext as well. This is what their relationship is about. It's a tension between wanting to be together and being pulled apart by not just the male sailors, but by the excitement of the city and the adulation that awaits him there. Although in that moment, he's trying to get back to her. He's not loving being pulled away by other dancers. So this is a great cinematic interpretation. And it's one of those scenes that I saw for the second time, and it made me say, my God, Bradley Cooper is brilliant. Just brilliant to write this into the film. I don't know if it really happened or not, but it didn't matter. The point is, he goes deep into who Lenny is, you know, his fascinations, his passions, and his mutability into many selves. So let's move on. Oh, it's 8:30 already, and I'm only on page 3 of 5 pages of notes. There's just so much in this film. And if you have any questions, you know, please chime in. You know, I love to talk, as you know, but I'm talking about the movie. And I hope I'm opening it up to you for what I see in it, which is some damn good filmmaking and great engagement. You have to work to do it, because it doesn't spoon feed you everything. Okay, then there's a very important scene. And again, this is part of Felicia's estrangement that's growing. we saw him composing alone at the piano. And he walks into the living room, it's a low angle shot, and he throws open the pages of manuscript and he says, I've completed mass, right? And the room applauds. But Felicia leaves the room and she jumps into the swimming pool. And he notices this, and there's a shot of him looking at her, kind of lost. And then there's an underwater shot of her at the bottom of the pool looking very unhappy. And she needs to escape, right? She needs the embryonic fluid of the water in the pool to insulate her from what she perceives now as toxic. He's his ineffable joy, and she can't share it because he needs to be loved. And his creativity is really, he rarely says, I love you until she's sick. So that's what that scene underwater is about. One more comment I have that I realized early in the film. This film is not about gay sex or bisexuality. You don't see much of it at all. You don't see much of their heterosexual sex. It's about divided attention. Right. Lenny is distracted by men. He loves Alicia. He is distracted by Broadway from serious composing, that he does both extremely well. So this is about a personality, a human being who's all over the place. It doesn't matter, what it is. He just can't sit still. We don't know if he's ADD or not. He's so productive. It's hard to say because he doesn't spin his wheels. He gets stuff done, even though he says, I haven't really done that much at the end of the film. But again, this notion of he needs attention, yet because his attention is divided between people, he is very hard to receive the kind of attention he wants from two people at the same time. So he doesn't have threesomes. He has twosomes. It's just so much a part of this film. It's not really about the gayness. It could be anything. I don't know what else it would be, but another film might couch it differently. I just want to stress that this is not a gay film. It's about so much more than sex. It's about his relationship to her and the cost of that relationship to both of them. Okay, after the swimming pool, they're in the balcony and they're listening to one of his pieces being performed. And the lineup is Felicia in the background, Lenny in the middle, and Tommy in front of Lenny, and Tommy's other boyfriend in front of Tommy. And Tommy turns and exchanges a brief smile with Lenny and turns back to listen. And that shot is from Felicia's point of view. So it's like, this is what she witnesses. And then we cut back to her, and then she sees they're holding hands. Last straw. And you see on her face, she's seething with anger, and she's also in terrible pain.
Movie night now. I wasn't going to go to that movie, but it might be nice to someone's house, see the movie again, and I'll view it very differently because of him.
Who sang that? Wave your hand. I don't see. Okay, I don't know. It's often helpful to see complex films. We've seen many of them, like The Third Murder, the Japanese film, or Koreeda. And we'll see some others where there's much more there than meets the eye. And this is one of those films. I'm so glad I saw it this afternoon because I thought it was so much better. Sometimes you see a film like Drive My Car, very complex Korean film or Japanese film. And you know you're in the presence of something powerful, but you don't know what it is, right? The film Past Lives, about a woman's teenage boyfriend coming back into her life 25 years later, getting great notices. I felt I was in the presence of something. I didn't feel it was as successful as Drive My Car, or there's also Broker by Koreeda, about baby broker, policemen who are baby brokers. It's not as cruel as it seems. And a lot of Asian films are like that. You really have to see it to absorb the meaning behind what is said explicitly. So after that scene where she sees them holding hands, he's receiving lots of adulation from the crowd. She leaves, and then she shuts him out of their hotel room. She puts his slippers and toothbrush on the floor and closes the door. And that's where the line, then it's Thanksgiving, and that's where Jamie says, why weren't you at Thanksgiving? And he skates past that question. And then comes the big argument. And this is played in a master shot. And I see why they did it, because they're both so good. I don't think that's the right decision because each says so many terribly important lines to each other. They hurt each other back and forth. This is a real argument. And it's one of the few full-blown, bloody argument, let's see how much we can hurt each other arguments. And it doesn't have to be close-ups. It can be two shots. So they're both in the same shot, but I want to see that tension bursting on the screen. And, she knows she shouldn't be so angry, but she tells him off. And she tells him what his real MO is. She says, you're avoiding all your other obligations because you're such a glory hound. Yes, you pursue your music, but you pursue the spotlight as well. And she says, anger drives you as well. Now, maybe that's anger at his father. I don't know. She says, you're so good up there conducting, and the music is so good, you're throwing it back at us, not out of love, but out of anger. This really insults him because that's not his experience when he's conducting. He's fully experiencing himself, but he's not realizing that anger may be a part of it. How dare you insult me, he says. And she says, your truth is a weapon and it's draining. Or he says that. That's what we observe. The truth about him is a weapon. It's draining for her. It's draining for us, an audience. And she says, it's so hard to love you. This is after the Snoopy floats by the window in the Macy's parade. You're going to die a lonely queen. And that's a really tough line because it means you fail as a man, you fail as a husband, a father. You fail as a person because you're going to be lonely. You will have had no relationship that abides through your life. Maybe I'm overwriting or writing the dialogue that isn't there excessively, but I think that helps us understand what's hidden in these words, or not so hidden. Powerful scene, and I think that will play differently for you once you see the whole movie again. That happens at 1 hour and 15 minutes in a 2-hour movie. So there's lots left. We see her back at work, receiving praise for her work as an actor. And then we go to the party where Lenny is doing coke with Tommy and Tommy's other boyfriend. I can't remember his name. Very funny scene where he puts the tablet on his head and they snort lines off that. This film is not, it's outrageous in its candor. This is probably what it was like. He talks to Jamie and she moves him away. Okay. Let's skip. There's a scene in a restaurant, and then this is one of the few Felicia-only scenes. She's having lunch with Sarah Silverman, Lenny's sister, and dismisses Jamie. Go away. We're not going to talk about anything more now. And apparently, Felicia had a date, her first date post-breakup. And who is he? Sarah Silverman wants to know. And it turns out this guy wanted to know if she would introduce him to another man as a romantic partner. And she says, I guess I fall for a certain type. So there's a self-knowledge, that abounds in these people. And, they know it and we know that they know it. And that's a freshness, this self-knowledge is really hard to tell. And she does it with a smile. But she's always known that. And then she realizes her own arrogance, thinking I could be enough for him. See, she realizes her own self-deception. No human being could hold this marriage together. No human being could contain him. you know, as a loving partner. And her arrogance was that she thought she could do it because she was in his trance as well. So, you know, it's like marriages and relationships are contracts, and they have their pluses and their minuses, their drawbacks. And sometimes we strike a bad deal because we think we need it. You know, for her, it's, you know, she thought she could do it, not because she was a weak woman and she'd let him walk all over her, but she was strong enough to allow for his dalliances and to keep his career on track and to keep him stable enough so that he could continue to work, that he has a gift and she wants to protect that gift. And in that scene in the hotel room where she's yelling at him, she says, "You're abusing your gift." You know, and that's, I believe, how she gets into the anger comment. And then we get into the church in England. Starts out wide with him in the background in the orchestra, and it slowly creeps into him in a full shot down the aisle of the church. You see people in the rows, and he is as exuberant as we have ever seen him in the movie. Who commented? Marina, you commented on that? It was somebody else's favorite scene. Mitchell's. Given what we said, Mitch, does that explain why you like that scene so much at all? Have I convinced you? You're muted. I mean, you can still say no. I think, you know, it's a horrible movie, but I like the scene. Lower left corner of your screen.
Mine, it's upper right.
You're what?
For mine, it's upper right. So it's
okay.
Yeah.
I think you were saying my ideas are right.
Yeah. I just wanted to add a PS that I have about 20 guys here in the desert that you know, they ask me what to watch, and when you come out with a movie, I tell them to watch it. Unanimously, I did not get a good vibe from any of them as far as being commercially enjoyable. I think that it was an artistic success, but that doesn't sell well in the market. But your explanations certainly make sense.
Okay, let me finish with that and I'll come back. You bring up something very important, is commercial success, you know, and what praise has this movie received. In that moment when he's conducting, I suppose it's from Kaddish, by the way, my wife informed me. He is both creator and performer. He is enjoying the fruits of his labor as an introvert, as a solitary creative, by getting to act it out on the rostrum with a 100-piece orchestra and, you know, a couple hundred people behind him. This is the merger of his tensions within him. And that's why he's so joyous. This is the only place where he can be fully himself, not in bed, you know, but resolving those, you know, this is where he gets to be who he wants to be. And it was so much all over his face in his performance. And then the camera drifts around to the left and pulls back a little bit. And there's a couple of shots of the musicians, but then it comes back to him and it's over. And there's a moment of silence and then everything erupts into applause. He runs off the rostrum and she's there. And he says, "You came." Like she surprised him, like she is forgiving, as she would be. And the embrace, and she says, "You didn't lie, you know. I'm sorry. You know, we hurt each other." I forget what is said there, but the point is that they're back together again.
She said you were not angry
Not
because
angry.
during the argument, she accused him of being angry inside.
I see.
And when
I
she
see.
came, she
Right.
said, "You are not angry."
No, there was joy in his whole body, his whole being, you know, in concert with the music. That was worth 6 years of study, that scene alone. So that's some kind of closure. But this is the melding of his, you know, what he needs the most. Adulation from the people around him, as well as an indulgence in his creative gifts. Then at 1:35, we learn there's that doctor scene. One shot, We never see the doctor's face. He pulls up a chair, holds her hand. He says, don't worry, we'll get you back to the stage after your mastectomy. The cue that's playing is Age of Anxiety. Very appropriate, not just because of the words, but the tonal quality of it. And then she's sicker. She's in a bandana, lost her hair to chemotherapy. And they're friends. It's the guy who was interviewing Lenny earlier, a close friend, and his wife. And they talk about the bar mitzvah that she dragged them to, and Lenny was wearing white. And he's called up to speak, and it takes forever because he has to say hello to everybody on his way up. And she says, and now we have the bride. It's very funny. And then suddenly the wedding waltz, Lohengrin's bridal procession, comes from the piano and he's playing it. He's been listening. It's very funny. And then, of course, it ends sadly. She says, I can't have any more visitors. It's too much. And then there's a phone call where he says he's bailing on a rehearsal or something or an event. No, I'm not coming back to the city. You work it out. You're my manager, whoever it is. And he goes back and he hugs a pillow. He screams into the pillow and then he cries. Great performance. And then Felicia and Jamie are talking, and it's like the final lesson between mother and daughter. And she says, what people need is kindness. That's the supreme lesson, is to be kind to other people. And Lenny wasn't that kind to her, couldn't help it. And then Lenny calls the others, the whole family together, and have a group hug. A very moving moment. And in the death scene, or close to death, he gets into bed behind her. Oh, he comes in as a doctor in surgical whites, or Dr. Whites, and a stethoscope. I thought that was kind of a funny touch, but a little out of character. And he says, I love you to her, and puts his arm around her. And before she expires, we don't see her final breath, but she's looking at something out the window. And the next shot is, the music is called postlude as opposed to prelude. And one of the children, it's a wide shot. It's the point of view of somebody looking through the window. And it's one of the kids runs out on the lawn, and he runs out after the child and embraces her, and the others come out. This is their group hug without the mother. And that's what we're seeing. That's her death moment. And then they pack up the car and they leave Fairfield, and the car goes away down the driveway. And then what happens? There's a dissolve to later in time. And those two bars on the side disappear, and it goes to full screen. He's free now to extend to his limits, to be fully himself. And he runs in, he tells his assistant, bring the bags. He runs into the Tanglewood shed. And that's when he has the scene showing the black conductor how to conduct a moment. And it's a cool scene. I'm not sure I get the difference between the various performances. But he doesn't conduct, he just tells him, he coaches him through it, proving he's a great teacher. And then he tells the orchestra, be kind to him. And then he's dancing with the guy, and they're making out on the dance floor, and Lenny's got a beer, the plastic red cup that the frat boys drink from, and who knows what else they've had. And he's partying. And he's also fully realizing himself. But in a way, is he free to be without her? Well, the next scene is back to the opening scene in that interview with the camera crew. And this is a line that he repeats. It's a Somerset Maugham, or it's some poet's line. The summer sings within me. And he says, but not as strongly as it used to. Meaning her loss has taken something out of me. And then he says, do you have any more questions? And that's the end of the movie until we go into the credits, and you see the actual Leonard Bernstein conducting, which I didn't have time to. But does anybody want to comment on the reactions to seeing the actual Leonard conduct? Because I didn't see it again this time. Did you like it? Did you feel like you knew him better? Did you appreciate his performance? What do you think? I'm going to watch it again, whether you tell me or not. Okay. God, this was a great movie. I just, who knew Bradley Cooper could be this good a director? It's amazing. You know, when you break it apart and you see, mostly it starts with script. This is constructed, all those cool transitions in the first 18 minutes. They were designed, you know, they didn't just happen. He planned them, you know, and that dance scene on the town with the sailors, that's great stuff. And this guy has it. Now, I saw A Star is Born. I didn't love it. I don't like the story. You know, it was kind of melodramatic. Not that it was a bad film. That was the second film he directed. I forget what the first one was. Maybe somebody knows what it is. But this doesn't happen. Now, in terms of what Mitch brought up about commercially, nobody liked it. This film was not mentioned on the Golden Globes. He and she got notices in a couple critics awards for best performer, actor and you know, male and female. Did not get best picture mentions. We'll see how it does in the Oscars. Why? Because this was, you know, the films that did get cited were Anatomy of a Fall or Past Lives. As I said, these are two very understated movies. The first one, a kind of a thriller, did she do it or didn't she? And Past Lives is how's she going to react when her boyfriend from the teen years shows up when she's 35 and married, you know, and that wasn't as dramatic as I felt it needed to be, but it's a very good film and very well thought through. So was Anatomy of a Fall. But these films are not as emotionally engaging. And it's because so much is in the plotting. And they're very good, especially Anatomy of a Fall. Because it's a good thriller, it's point counterpoint. You know, a new fact is introduced and then, oh, she's really guilty. You know, and then something else is introduced and, oh, she's not guilty. Here's another way of looking at the data, the evidence that we have. And you go back and forth for most of the film until her son says, my dad was talking to me about our dog who was dying. I won't ruin it for you if you choose to see it. It's worth seeing. And there's a great scene about their relationship in the middle of the film where they argue, you know, it's the same kind of argument. You're so involved in being afraid of your work and you avoid it, you know, that's what's wrong with you, you know, and it's she hurts him and he hurts her. It's savage, like this scene was in the movie. But this, despite its understatement, this film is compelling because as little as you know when you're going through it, it pulls you through it. And as a result, you've seen them go through all these scenes and you feel something for them. It's like you feel the character more because this was a full-blooded American English drama. And there was lots of ups and downs in it. There's lots of intrigue. It was gorgeous to look at, but there's something about this film that goes deeper because of your connection with the personalities involved. And it's all to the script's credit, his direction, and the performances of him and Carey Mulligan. You know, I think they both deserve Oscars for this, but that's just my take. But can it be a bad movie and still get acclaim? Sure, happens all the time. Mitch, I think it just demands a lot of the audience, and it's okay if people don't want to give it because it's a particular taste. You know, it's not a fun movie. And it's not an easy movie. And those films don't always get rewarded. You know, it's why they don't film Ibsen plays anymore. You know, serious movies are kind of looked askance. Barbie, Oppenheimer, great films. You know, it's not like it's got to be dour and sad for me, but for other reasons, you know, look to them to dominate the awards. So it's I'm sorry that the performances were overlooked by critics, you know, the New York critics, the LA critics. But he did it, and believe me, he's really much more respected now as a filmmaker. And I just, maybe I'm old-fashioned, you know, because I grew up on Sidney Lumet and, you know, 12 Angry Men, and that was early for me. But Later dramas, Network, it's another Lumet piece, you know, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. That film is very dated if you watch it. Prince of the City, a lot of the Lumet films feel very dated. But there are other humanistic filmmakers over decades, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where they really did achieve this kind of intimacy and this profound understanding of issues. It's a lot more simplistic than the films are today, and certainly more simplistic than this one. But there is a tradition of this kind of humanistic drama, and I call this a humanistic drama in you know, unequivocally. It's not self-indulgent on the part of the filmmaker. It's very knowing and objective, yet, you know, connected. So that's my rant for the night. Thanks for listening. I promised you maybe the levees of Monticello for 2 weeks from tonight. The synagogue hasn't paid for it yet, so I can't send you the link, but I expect to have that next week, maybe the Friday before the 25th. And because I've asked for it on that Friday afternoon to start, and you can have a whole week to see it. And yes, Betty, you're muted. You're muted. Still muted. Lower left. There you no, that little microphone.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to say something about the movie on a whole different topic. I thought the makeup was absolutely incredible. I mean, it looked so much like him. So I know we haven't talked about that at all, but I thought that was unbelievable how they changed, you know, as he aged, and also just how much it really looked like him.
Yeah. No, it's a great job. And her makeup as well, aging and the sickness was so well done subtly. It felt real in terms of the movie. Okay, so we're almost done. I want to thank the newcomers, which Laura, you're not a newcomer, but you haven't been with us. Linda Schatzer, welcome. And I think we had one more newcomer who's not with us anymore. Steve Greenberg, always good to have you back. The Moles, thank you for joining us. Thank Jeffrey and Brad for introducing us. I hope you come back for more. I hope this rose to your level of expectation. I think it was a great discussion. I got to say everything I wanted to. I'm sorry if it was at your expense, but this is such a dense movie. I really feel like it needs to be explicated because the skill is in the details. Not that any one moment makes it great, but all of them taken together. You know, this is really knowing filmmaking. All right, so you'll get emails from me. Joel, have you been getting my emails? You're muted. Unmute yourself.
Actually not. Mitch is my secretary. He sends me the reminders.
I see.
But
okay,
but
but you're one of the 20 guys who liked it.
yes. Well, actually, there's a real quick. I'll tell you that we have a somewhat connection to Bradley Cooper, and the author that also wrote it, Josh Singer, are both from the local suburban Philadelphia area, and Bradley Cooper went to high school with my son.
Wow, that's a piece of ownership, I guess.
So we root for Bradley.
Okay, you root for him. Okay, yeah. Local boy made good.
Yes,
you root for him because he's an Eagles fan.
An Eagles fan. Okay, so you'll hear from me by email. Linda, once again, welcome. And Gail and Dave, welcome to you. Welcome to all of you. You really made the night, and I'll see you in 2 weeks, I hope. And if we can't get the levies in time, there's so many other good films coming down the pike. We'll see something, and maybe even a comedy or two. Take care, everybody. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
So I was wondering whether the title Maestro.
Ground. Granular.
Yeah, but
It's interesting.
on the other hand, the name Leonard Bernstein would set you up.
Well,
And-
they couldn't use the name Lenny because that already was a movie.
Yeah. Well, that wouldn't have worked. I mean, I know his friends called him Lenny,
Yeah, they couldn't
Right.
use it.
but no.
That was a long meeting, hour and a half.
Yeah. It's supposed to be an hour and a half, but a lot of times he had a lot to say. And I'm glad that he said it because I agree with most of what he said.
It's interesting that, I mean, obviously Jim and I have different perspectives, but I love The Star Is Born with Lady Gaga. And so did it grossed $465 million. So I have a sense of what direction Jim goes.
Well,
He doesn't follow the money.
no, no, he doesn't follow money at all. And I guess that's what I like about him. I mean, he's not going with that. He's going with what he thinks are good directors and good scenes and how it was put together.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that.
He criticized, something that was a very successful commercial enterprise.
Oh, I'm sorry. He can think it's, look, Mark Ofish thinks everything's a piece of shit.
Boy swallowed Jim. Are we finished with The Crown?
I think episode 10.
If you don't know.
I guess it would be the last episode.
I-
I don't know. It's either 10 or 12. Maybe 10.
Wolf.
Fox.
Fox. Wolf.
Even my kids today knew the difference between what a fox looks like and a wolf. That was impressive.
That's a what? Queen has a watch. Oh, is this the 75th anniversary?
70 at 11, then lunch with the Commonwealth Secretary General. So I thought the black shoes and low heel, which also works well for the first meeting after breakfast. Remind me, the Duke of Edinburgh, the Lord Chamberlain, and the Duke of Norfolk. Oh yes. We ever discover what that was about? They wouldn't say. It's not normally a good sign.
Good morning. The time is 9 o'clock. Here are the news headlines for today. It has been more than 2 years since the British was went to war with Iraq. The justification for the invasion at the time was the same as the stockpile of weapons of mass destruction. Now, with the Secretary General of the UN overseeing this crisis,